On this week's episode, we talk about Ubisoft trying to sneak ads into their games, Starfield developers' responses to negative Steam reviews, the Dragon's Dogma release date, price, and PC requirements revealed, Geoff Keighley's response to the Dave the Diver nomination controversy, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, Episode 8. I am your host, the man whose minimum system requirements are breakfast burritos and freshly ground black coffee, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man whose minimum system requirements are the Linux operating system and somewhere quiet to finish his books, Justin, better known as I Am Zeracon. How you doing today?
I am doing quite well. I had a good Thanksgiving. It was definitely good to spend some time with family, so that was great. Got to enjoy the weekend. One thing though is that I'm not too fond about is the temperature suddenly dropped drastically these past few days, and while I don't normally, while I don't mind that it gets cold, the fact that there was wind and the wind chill just made things worse. That's not very pleasant there. So hopefully the wind calms down some. That would be nice. So that way, while it's cold and that's fine out my walking in the cold, just that wind chill really does me in though. But yeah, other than that though, it's been a pretty good weekend. How have you been doing?
Not too bad. I just want to comment real quickly regarding the wind chill versus actual like colder temperature, at least on the thermometer and everything. So, having lived in Alaska for a long time, mostly in colder part of Alaska, even though we'd get down to minus 40, minus 50, rare occasions minus 60. Because of the fact that number one, it was a dry cold, and number two, the air was just completely still at that point. I maintain that having a wind chill at 30 above or lower is worse than 40 below. Ooh. Because I maintain that even if you're in a drier climate, it's still worse than that 40 below. Because the 40 below, at least where I lived, it was almost always just like everything was completely still. And it was very, very cold. But it didn't cut through. You could wear layers. You could keep yourself warm-ish. I mean, there's only so much you can do depending on what kind of layers you put on and everything. But I always found that when I moved to Seward, which is like right on the coast, it's like both next to mountains and on the coast. Has a bay nearby. When it got windy there during the winter, it was worse than the 40 below in Glen Allen, in my opinion. It's just because it just cuts through everything. It's like it's really hard to stay warm when you're dealing with that, and it was awful. Like the first time we visited Seward was actually the day the Switch came out, because I bought the Switch. I got the Switch at the midnight launch, and then we went to Seward the next morning for a second job interview I had before I actually got the job. And that day it was brutally windy and cold. We were like, are we trading the 40 below for this? And it was super icy on top of that. So it was like really hard to drive around in our front wheel drive van that just never did well on the ice. And it was brutally cold. And thankfully that wasn't the normal thing, but it definitely happened occasionally. And it's definitely worse. And around here, it's pretty similar in terms of how cold it can get to Seward. Don't have the mountains or the ocean breeze, but it does get it can get pretty cold with the wind chill. Anyway, all that being said, my weekend was good. Thanksgiving went pretty well. I would say the turkey I smoked was not the best one I've done. It was still really good, just not the best. So that was slightly disappointing to me, but I mean it was still good. The only problem was that there wasn't a whole lot left over, so it didn't last as long as it usually does. But last year I had made up 2 turkeys because we had pretty much the whole family, and didn't actually need 2 turkeys, and I just didn't know because I think it was it was the first time that I had hosted everyone, and it was like 21, 22 people, something like that. And this year, it was about 20 people, but because last year we only went through 1 turkey, I only made 1. So anyway, but yeah, it was pretty good. At least I mean, there was still some busyness, but I was able to get some gaming in and things like that. So what games have you been playing over the past week, especially with that OLED? Ooh. In fact, you can even talk some more about your impressions of the OLED now that we've had it a bit longer.
Yeah, the OLED definitely has. I've spent some more time with it, and I did a little bit of experimenting, some stuff that I didn't think about when I first started playing with it, and then stuff later on. And the first thing I sort of started to test was the 90 hertz display, just to see like what games I could get to run at 90 hertz. And predictably, the games that I play, which I'll talk later, like Half-Life, that obviously went to 90 frames per second. I tested Katamari Damacy Reroll, that went to 90 frames per second. And Daemon X Machina, that actually went to 90 frames per second. There were a couple drops to the low 80s, but for the most part, it actually stayed up at 90. One weird thing though, which I actually noticed when I started to record footage, is that for some reason, which might actually be the reason because of my laptop when I was recording, it was the frame rate, or at least the hertz, was capped at 60 instead of 90, and I couldn't adjust it any further than that. So that was weird. I'm not certain what the reason for that was, but it does.
I was just gonna say, when you're recording, it is probably dependent on number 1, your monitor, and number 2, what you have the system settings at. So if your monitor doesn't go above 60, which I don't know if it does or not, does it? I mean, what's your refresh rate?
It's stuck at 60.
Then that would be why, is because of that. But for the if you have a higher refresh rate on your monitor, then you can do more than that. But even then, it's not. I mean, it's like you might be able to technically get the higher frame rate, but it's not going to record the higher frame rate.
Yeah, and I didn't necessarily want to or care about recording the higher frame rate. I just wanted to show like the games could do that, just to show with the frame rate counter, just for that example. But yeah, but I also liked enjoying it. And a lot of the games that I chose, especially with Daemon X Machina, I chose just because I really wanted to see how stylized games looked with the more vibrant colors that the OLED screen provides. Yeah. But still, overall, I think that the experience is pretty good. One thing that I didn't mention last week, which isn't a big thing, but something I noticed now, which I don't know if this is sort of a defect of my product, but I noticed that later on that the Steam and the option buttons on the OLED were, I guess, faded, because they were a whole lot darker than what were on the LCD version that I had. And I'm pretty certain that when I saw your OLED model, it was still as bright as the other one. So I think that my one just had like a slight defect with the paints or something like that.
No, actually, they're all a dark color. They're not the white anymore. They're like a gray color.
Oh, okay.
So it's not a defect, just normal.
Okay, yeah. But I guess going into the games themselves though, so I particularly got into Half-Life 1 because of the fact that Valve made an update for it that supported full controller support, and I thought that's interesting. Also, it has been a long time since I played Half-Life, and I didn't get too far into the game. And I'll admit that that the controller support works pretty well. I did actually turn off auto. Well, not I forget what it's called. It's not like auto aim, but it locks onto enemies. I turned that off because I really did not want that. Oh yeah, aim assist. I turned that off.
Okay.
When I first tried playing it, though, for some reason the left stick wasn't working at all for movements, and I tried it a couple times to get it to work, but it wasn't working at all. So I was disappointed. I stopped, but I came back a couple days later and it worked again. Not sure what the problem was there, but so far, ever since then, it's been playing pretty well. A little bit more of Katamari Damacy just because I'm still trying to get those last 2 achievements. I did get one of them. I got all of the presents that you need to collect in the game, but I still need to collect every single other item in the game to get 100%. So working on that, that's a work in progress. Sekiro, I went back to that game. That is making some more progress. In fact, I went through several different areas. The first area was a dungeon area, and that part at first when I went there, I did not like it all, just because there are enemy types that you have to kill twice. You kill them one time, and then you think they're done for, but then after several minutes, or not several minutes, but after about 5 to 10 seconds, they'll get back up again, and that just really made me nervous. Because of the fact that when those enemies grab you, they deal a ton of damage, and so you really have to just sneak behind them constantly, try to whittle down their health until you can perform an execution. And after I got through that area, that was pretty much smooth sailing. Went through another area where there were a bunch of monks. They weren't too bad. I pretty much just stealth my way through that area, but yeah, I think I should be getting close to another boss battle. It seems to be that way, but we'll see what happens next week. Oh yeah, also played a little bit of Stardew Valley with some friends. We're still doing some more farming work, or still trying to build up our other attributes, so I'm still doing farming work. That's going well, and also because of the fact that when we started, we just went and did our own thing to contribute to the farm, I realized that there were a bunch of early game quests that I never started. So I also decided to start doing that as well, and that's also coming along and clearing out that list there. But yeah, I think that's all of the games that I've played this weekend. Oh, and of course, Daemon X Machina. Oh, I just forgot. Remember that. That's going pretty well. I've finished the main game. I finished pretty much all of the content. It's just there are three achievements left in the game where they want you to altogether defeat 100,000 enemies. And the problem with that is the fact that I literally went through the entire game. I literally grinded to get all of the weapons and armor, and I haven't even hit 20,000 enemies.
Oh my goodness!
And I don't know if I even want to bother doing that.
Yeah, that seems kind of ridiculous. Is there?
I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, so I don't necessarily even mind that with games because I've seen that happen before, but it definitely seemed more manageable in other games.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if there's like any particular level where you get more enemies than others where it would be easier to grind that out. I mean, it's still a lot of enemies, but...
There are two. Like I looked online and saw, and I also looked on Steam forums and saw there are two levels. One, you can kill, I think, 200 enemies, but the problem is you're in this giant robot that's so unwieldy that it takes so much time that it's unless you're very good at it, it's going to be too much of a time waster.
Right.
And the other one, which is the one that you that footage that I provided, you can defeat about, I think, 20 to 30 enemies in that level. The only problem with that is that there's a small chance that you'll get a random encounter, which will take probably about a minute or two to complete. So instead of, say, taking about 30 seconds to clear that level and keep doing it, you might have a chance to add an extra minute or two of you finding one enemy that you don't really want to fight.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. Yeah, looking at your footage, though, I mean, like, I can't remember if I've ever actually played any of Half-Life 1, but from what I remember looking at in the past, it seems like they've improved the visuals a bit, too, like, or at least the shading and that sort of thing. Like, it looks better than it did before. I could be wrong on that front, because the only version of Half-Life 1 that I've, like, actually played, or, well, I guess I should say, I don't think I've ever played Half-Life 1 itself. I've played a couple of the side games, both Blue Shift and whatever the green one was. But when we play as one of the cops, and then when you play as one of the soldiers that's coming to hunt Gordon Freeman. For some reason, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But anyway, the only time I played anything of Half-Life 1 was the fan remake called Black Mesa, which I played when it was in beta, before they had completed the full game, and they hadn't gotten the very last area done yet. And now they have the full game. I haven't. I just haven't tried going back through it, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, cool stuff. I, of course, also have been playing pretty much exclusively my Steam Deck OLED. One of the first games I decided to jump into is a almost 30-year-old game now, which I had mentioned that I had been wanting to check out, called Beyond a Steel Sky. And it is a point-and-click adventure game, all pixel art. So at least visually, it actually holds up decently well. It doesn't have button controls, at least not in the 1994 version, which I got free through GOG a long time ago. But it's an interesting game. It's pretty humorous. Sometimes the puzzles are a little on the obscure side in terms of the solutions, but I spent probably like 2 or 3 hours playing that on Saturday, and this is probably the first time where I've used the touchpad almost exclusively to play a game, because it's basically it's a mouse game, and like I'll use the analog triggers as mouse buttons occasionally, but that's about the extent of any button controls or anything that I'm using, because it's just you click to move around, you click to talk to people, you move the mouse up to the top of the screen to select items, to interact with stuff, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. One thing I did find out after I had played a bit of that is that they actually did a remake of it in 2020 that's free on Steam. And it's still pixel art and everything. I don't know anything about how it controls on Steam Deck or otherwise. My guess is still, point and click and everything. It's just updated visuals, and I think it might be verified on Steam Deck. I can't well, it's probably not verified. It's probably just playable. But either way, I mean, like, in some ways I kind of wish I had played that one, because it would have been a little bit less workaround to get it going, because, with GOG, when you get something from GOG, you end up having to run Galaxy in order to in order to start up the game. And it works. It just, occasionally there's a little more frustrations when it comes to Proton. So, but either way, it ended up working out all right. Additionally, I decided I wanted to mess around with some of the games that I had previously put on my original Steam Deck, which, by the way, I was able to sell my original one yesterday.
Nice.
And so I had tried to do a couple of the PS3 games, and those ones were not working for me. but I think it's because I have to get the firmware for the PS3 in order to run those, because I think that was the error that was coming up, was just not having the firmware. So I just haven't gotten around to actually going and doing that, and I haven't cared that much because there's none of them that I wanted to play that bad. It was more just kind of like I wanted to test a couple of them out, see if they perform at all any better, particularly Ratchet and Clank, Into the Nexus, and Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, because those are two that I have on there that I've seen running better. Oh, and then also the Metal Gear Solid HD collection. I wanted to try that because I've seen other people running Metal Gear Solid 3 and they were getting 60 frames per second, but when I tried running it, it felt like I was running through molasses. It was terrible, and I couldn't figure out why, and I looked up and I couldn't find anything in the settings to fix it. It's like, menus, 60 frames, no problem. But outside of the menus, it's terrible. It runs worse than it does on the 3DS. Or at least it feels worse than it does on the 3DS. No, it runs worse. Yeah, it runs worse. But, I mean, it's just, PS3 emulation is always... I mean, tends to not be great on something unless it's super powerful. And then it's just, yeah, it's really weird. One thing I did forget to mention with Beyond a Steel Sky, which I'm now blanking on what I was going to say about that. What was it? I'll probably just come back to that if it comes back to mind. But other things I did get to test out emulation-wise, I decided to do Wind Waker HD. And, I mean, of course, I already knew that this game runs pretty well on Steam Deck. It looks great, and on the OLED screen, it's like, oh man, like, even if this game never comes to Switch on the OLED, it runs perfectly on the Steam Deck. Now, the one thing that would convince me to buy it on the Switch would be if it ran at 60 frames per second on there, which is not impossible. It is theoretically possible. They've done it with some Wii U games. They've updated them to run at 60 on the Switch. So, if they were able to do that, that would convince me to buy it, because the emulated version only runs at 30. There doesn't seem to be a way around that, unfortunately. But, yeah, I mean, it looks fantastic. Basically, the only part I played was going through the fortress, whatever's... I can't remember the name of the fortress, but it's basically, like, right after you first leave his home island, and then you go to the fortress for the first time to try and find your sister before you get launched off the island and everything, or launched off of the fortress onto whatever the name of the island is, the first place you go to. But it's yeah, looks great, runs great. I ended up having to switch the button layout to have A in the spot that it is on the Steam Deck versus the Switch, versus Nintendo, just because it was throwing me off too much. I just because I haven't been, I think it's mostly because of the muscle memory associated with the Steam Deck itself that it's throwing me off. Because, like, if I'm playing the Switch, I don't have that problem. But when I'm playing the Steam Deck, it's different because I'm used to A being on the bottom and not on the right. So, anyway. But additionally, for emulation, I also I played a little bit of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which of course runs great on the Steam Deck. I'm not gonna let myself get back into that game because I love it, but I have other Castlevania games that I haven't played yet. So rather than replaying that one, as much as I enjoy it, it's like there's other fantastic ones, because like I have the Advance Collection, which I've heard those games are amazing. I have the Lords of Shadow games, which I played a little bit of the first one, and I've played the Mirror of Fate one, which was originally on 3DS. I haven't played it on Steam, on PC or Steam Deck, but I did play it on 3DS and enjoyed it a lot. In fact, that was my first Castlevania game, actual Castlevania game that I played. last year. And yeah. Oh, did I really get rid? Oh, okay. I do have footage from one of the other games I emulated. That is Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers for Game Boy Advance. I don't know. Have you ever played that one?
Yeah, yeah, it's been such a long time since I played that game, but yeah, I remember I bought it from GameStop years ago. But
Yeah.
so was that a game that you played before?
I had only played it a tiny bit. Like I had emulated it many years ago when I didn't have a Game Boy Advance, and the little bit that I had played, I enjoyed, and of course since then I got really into like Diablo and that sort of thing, and this is basically a Diablo game. I mean, that's really what it is. I had tried to get into like the PS2/GameCube Two Towers game, and I couldn't get into it. I'm sure if I gave it another try again, I'd probably be able to get into it, but for some reason I just couldn't get into that. But I really liked this one, the little bit that I had played, and I didn't play very much. But yeah, I just kind of dabbled with it more because, I mean, I think it's fun, but at the same time, I mean, if I really want to play a Diablo game, I haven't finished 3 of the 4 Diablo games I have, so there's that. So, but then, speaking of Diablo, I did install all the Diablo games on my Steam Deck. So, Diablo 2 Resurrected, that one runs at 60 frames per second without any real difficulty. It looks great. There's all that. It has button controls, so it works great from that standpoint. I definitely enjoyed, messing with that. It's still like, I wish I could get as much into it as I did with 3 and 4, but it's so much harder to get into because it is a hard game. And, I mean, thankfully, that one does have cross save. I mean, it just has your save on battle.net. So like all the progress I had made on Switch, I could very easily carry over to Steam or to PC and Steam Deck. But it controls great. I mean, the Switch version, at least from without actually testing it for myself, I believe it runs around 60. And maintains it pretty well. It's just more blurry than the PC version, obviously. But even though that's the case, Diablo 3, which so I decided to buy 2 and 3 because they were on sale. I mean, it was like, I think it was $15, maybe $20 that you got both 2 and 3 together, and I just figured, 2, I know I can carry my progress over. 3 does not carry progress over. But what's worse about 3, in my opinion, is that it does not have button controls on PC and Steam Deck. At least not that I could figure out. I might just need to do a bit more research, but at least from what I looked up, it didn't seem like there's button controls at all for the PC version. And, I mean, like, I ended up playing a little bit with the touchpad, and I can definitely, map some controls to different buttons on the Steam Deck. And, like, I'm fine playing mouse and keyboard when I'm playing on PC, because the game controls just fine. I mean, controls great that way, but I like the button controls because they're just really well designed, and it bugs me that game does not do it. It does, however, hit 90 frames per second without any problems. Mostly because it's, like an 11-year-old game. Originally came out 11 years ago. So, but yeah, 90 frames per second, no problem. Max settings on everything. So at least that part's nice. I do wish that I could carry over characters from the Switch version, but they never did that, and I kind of see it more as like if I just want to, probably more if I want to do like free roam kind of thing, because you can do an adventure thing where you're not doing the campaign. And I don't know. It's an easier game, much easier, but it was what got me into Diablo, and it was what my wife got really into as well, and we played a lot of that together before we ended up getting 4. Well, we got 2. She was struggling with that because it's just a lot harder, and then we got 4, and 4 is a good middle ground between the two. It's not as hard as 2, but it is harder than 3, so... but it's still pretty fun. I mean, what little I played on Steam Deck, I still think that it's worth having on PC. And I definitely would try it some more. I think I just need to mess with the controls or see if there's some way to get button controls working properly. But additionally, more just as a test thing than anything else, I decided to re-download Spider-Man Remastered. And the main thing that really motivated me to do that was when I was selling my Steam Deck, the guy who was going to buy it wanted to see Spider-Man on the LCD. And I remembered that, oh yeah, Spider-Man Remastered is supposed to have HDR support. So I figured I would download it, check out the HDR. I'm kind of mixed on how much I care about the HDR. Like, I've never used it before. And, I mean, it does look good, but I don't feel like I'm missing anything by not having it turned on. So, I don't know. I basically just briefly... I played enough to get some gameplay footage since I already had it installed. And then I uninstalled it because I've already 100%ed the game. I'm not in a rush to play it again. I do think it's still a great game, still well worth playing, regardless of the Spider-Man 2 that I don't want to acknowledge actually exists. But another superhero open world game that I tested out was Prototype, which, another one, as I expected, runs at 90 frames per second. No problems whatsoever. I mean, all I really did was just run around the open world. I didn't get into any combat situations or anything, so I'm sure that would, that'll, obviously be more demanding, but I still don't think it's gonna have much, if any, hiccups, because it's a really well optimized game, and of course it's an old game too, so. But that was pretty cool, the little bit that I played of that. And then I also did some more Final Fantasy VII with those mods. Man, it looks great on the Steam Deck OLED. I mean, like, I think the mods as it is are already great, and it makes the game look great. But on the OLED screen, it just, like, it's gorgeous. Definitely really glad that I had a chance to play some more of that. I mean, I didn't play very much. I played, like, maybe an hour or two. One thing I will say is that, like, I knew that Remake really stretched out these early parts of the game, but I kind of, in some ways, forgot how much it stretches it out, because sections that literally take hours to get through, I mean, sections that take about, I mean, like, I got to this one part where you go to Sector 6, which is where you ultimately end up doing the cross-dressing thing and Don Corneo and all that. I got all the way there in like an hour and a half of game time from the very beginning of the game until there in Final Fantasy VII, and in Remake, I think that's probably like 15, 20 hours in.
Oh, gosh.
But the thing is that, like, I think Remake does it so well, because yes, it's padded, but it doesn't. I mean, like if you're not thinking about how short it was before necessarily, and you're just playing the game to play the game, I think it still works. And I definitely don't think that people's criticism of that is unreasonable. I just think that the combat feels so good in Remake that it didn't bother me that much. But still, it's kind of cool going back to Final Fantasy VII and just playing around with that after years and years of having previously played it numerous times. But the thing that I definitely played more than anything else on the OLED was, of course, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. And I've just been hooked on this game. I'm having so much fun with it. I'm really glad I decided to get back into that. I mean, of course, it looks great on the OLED screen. It already looked great on Steam Deck. Runs really well. It seems to just be capped at 60 frames per second. Like, it will not go above 60. I mean, it doesn't drop below 60 either, but it's just like, I try setting at 90 FPS or 90 hertz, and with the 90 FPS cap on the Steam Deck, and it just doesn't break 60. And I haven't tried seeing if it'll break 60 on PC itself, but I feel like it might not. I have to test it and find out for sure. But yeah, anyway, I've been having a great time with it. I'm gonna be playing that a lot. I don't know how much of any other games I'll be playing for a while, but at least for now, that's what I'm into. So lots of stuff this week. Well, anything else?
No, nothing else from me.
All right, so let's go into the news. So, the meme has finally become reality. And I suppose this isn't the first time it's happened, but Ubisoft decided that it would decided to sneak an ad into Assassin's Creed Odyssey I can't talk. They put an ad in Assassin's Creed Odyssey for the new Assassin's Creed Mirage, advertising that it was on sale. And this is something new. It hasn't happened before. I've played a lot of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I think I have like over 100 hours in that game, and I'm still not completely done with it. And yeah, I guess I think it's when like someone was trying to fast travel and then this ad popped up, and Ubisoft is saying, "Oh, this was a mistake. This wasn't. This was just a glitch. This wasn't supposed to happen." And promptly, of course, made it stop happening. But we've definitely seen memes about this kind of thing happening over the years, and I think actually NBA 2K might have done it previously before, on a similar level, among other ridiculous things like gambling in game. But I want to hear your thoughts on this whole thing.
Well, I personally feel that this PR speak of it's a glitch definitely was not a glitch. I don't see how something like this can be a glitch. You don't just program something to happen in a game for like that. I mean, imagine if you were playing Super Mario Brothers and then there was just an ad popping up for, "Hey, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate's on sale." Like, it's completely irrelevant to what you're doing right there. And sure, Assassin's Creed Mirage is the newest game, but you don't have... There's no reason why any sort of advertisement should pop up in a game. And the worst part about this is the fact that while the game, is discounted now, it's not going to be the same price as it was then. This is a $60 game, and you have an advertisement for it in there. Like, I already think that microtransactions in $60 games are bad enough, but to have ads in games for $60 games is ridiculous completely. And yeah, I do agree. I think that 2K did do something like that. Oh no, they did. They sort of had, I think it was when there are replays going on, replay clips of stuff that happens in the game. They're just banners for different, I can't remember if it's different companies or something. There's some sort of advertisement going on in those reclips, so that definitely has happened before. But I'm not surprised that Ubisoft did this. This definitely seems like something they would do. I don't believe their excuse quote unquote. Uh, yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah. So I will definitely say that yes, I'm with you. I don't believe their excuse. I did think of a way that there is the potential that this could actually be legitimately just a glitch, and that is, um, one thing that does show up with Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and this is just at the menu before you start the game. Like it'll have the screen where you choose to load your game, whatever. They'll typically have like little ads on the side there, that sort of thing. So it's not impossible. I think it's unlikely, but it's not impossible that maybe this was an ad that was programmed to actually show up at the title screen, but then something got messed up in the code and it showed up at a different point in the game. Now, that being said, I don't think that's actually what happened. I'm saying that I think it's not impossible that it could have happened. I just think that they were testing the waters. I mean, obviously that's what they were doing. They were testing the waters, seeing if they could get away with it. If people would complain about it, and obviously people did. I mean, at least they didn't do it in the middle of like combat or something, like just having it randomly pop up, because that would have been terrible. Because there are definitely times in the combat, particularly in Odyssey, where people don't go down as easily as they do in something like Mirage. That that could mean the difference between staying alive and dying. But even still, yeah, I think they're testing the waters. That's all there is to it, and they're trying to brush it off, pretend that they didn't do that, but they did, and they did it on purpose. That's my opinion anyway. So, but anyway, any other thoughts on this before we move on to the next topic?
No, I just wonder how long it could possibly be until they or someone else tries to do something like this again. Might be a year, might be 6 months. We'll have to see.
Yeah, one thing that I could see happening very easily is that one of these companies, I could see it, especially with like any company where they have a game with like billboards built in the game, they would probably put advertisements there, program those in to show like the latest sales, that sort of thing. Like in Spider-Man or any Cyberpunk could technically do it. Things like that. Any game where there's going to be like billboards or particularly when it's like video billboards, having something like that show up, advertisements in game, just kind of hide it a little bit more. Like something that I noticed in the prototype. I mean, when I was playing prototype, is that there are GameStop banners on sides of buildings, like billboards in a couple spots. And it's like, I mean, it's not that's not the same kind of thing for sure. It's obviously GameStop sponsored the game, and so they got their ads plugged into the game from that standpoint. But it's not like anything that's detracting from the gameplay. It's just an environmental thing. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I actually was going to mention that when you mentioned prototype, is the fact, or mentioned billboards. I think that if it's something like that, it's not as egregious, just because it is something that is off to the side. And I didn't notice the GameStop one when I played prototype, but I did notice DC Comics logo on a couple billboards. And I was curious about that, and I looked up that actually there was a partnership between the developer and company and DC, where they made a limited run of comic books tie-in. So that explained why that was there. So I don't necessarily think that, as long as the ads aren't, I guess, too obvious per se, is something like, hey, 15% off of these games or in sale for something like that. If it's something like maybe a logo or something like that, I don't think I would necessarily mind it as much, but just don't go overboard.
Right. Yeah, you don't want it to be too ridiculous. Like if you've ever seen Ready Player One. I mean, I haven't read the book, but you know, I love the movie, and there's one part where they're like the big evil corporation is talking about taking up like 80% of the person's view with ads. Like pop-up ads on their screen for the VR headset and everything, and just like, oh man, I could see that happening in the future for sure. But anyway, moving on to the next topic here, Dragon's Dogma 2. You want to cover that one?
Yes. So a couple of days ago, Capcom initially announced this a while back that they were going to reveal the release date for Dragon's Dogma 2, and they did actually come out and release it, and it's coming out next March, as a matter of fact. Let me actually pull up the exact date here. That is March the...
I think it was the 24th, maybe?
March 21st.
21st, okay.
Yep, and so it's coming out then, which is, frankly, a lot sooner than I would have expected, but hey, I think that's great. And then shortly, they also announced a couple other things as well. Along with that, they announced the price, which is $70, which is a first for Capcom. And then also a few days later, they announced the PC requirements for the game, which is interesting, I'll say. So for the minimum PC specs, it is Intel Core i5 10600 or an AMD Ryzen 5 3600, 16 gigabytes of RAM for GPU, either a GTX 1070 or an AMD RX 5500 XT with 8 gigs of VRAM. And for the minimum requirements, that's only for aiming for 1080p 30 frames per second. And they do note that frame rate might drop in graphically intensive scenes. For the recommended system PC specs, that is going to need an Intel Core i7 10700 or a Ryzen 5 3600X. Still 16 gigabytes for memory. And for graphics, you need a RTX 2080 or an AMD RX 6700. That's also for aiming for 4K 30 frames per second. They didn't announce what the storage requirements were. One thing they also mentioned, which wasn't on, say, like, different things, but I saw that on Steam page. It said that for ray tracing, a 2080 Ti or RX 6800 are required. So yeah, so that's what they have shared with us so far. So do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
Well, you are more a fan of Dragon's Dogma than I am, so I'll let you go for it.
Okay, so I've been looking forward to this game. I was very surprised that we actually were going to get this sequel in the first place. And I am actually completely disappointed that it is $70. Again, this is Capcom. I'm surprised because Capcom hasn't or didn't show that they would be doing this with Resident Evil 4 Remake. That was $60 for... I can't remember what the other previous game... I know they made another... Or I'm pretty certain they made another big game between Resident Evil 8 and the 4 Remake. I just can't remember what it was. But either way, whatever that was, that would have been $60. So this is their first $70 game. And... I really can't see myself swallowing that. I'm not swallowing that. In fact, I saw that they actually have it on sale on Green Man Gaming for, I think, $58. And I'm not certain if I want to do that or not, or just wait a little more. And on the other hand, I also feel like I'm not too surprised, considering the fact that Capcom also released the Mega Man Battle Network collection for $60 altogether, which was way more than I was expecting. But still, I don't know. And I guess one thing is I don't really feel that the minimum requirements are too bad. I think they're reasonable. However, I think for only 1080p 30 FPS, that's a bit of a stretch. I mean, I know that also the game, I think it's supposed to be using Unreal Engine 5. But I'm just thinking, I definitely think that the recommended specs are a bit, or at least personally just feel a bit higher than they should be. I don't know. Sure, we're several generations later, but I mean, people are still using like 1660 Ti's, and I'm just thinking to myself, wow. I don't, and also, I mean, granted, I'm not entirely certain how well my computer can play it, because it uses a mobile 5500, so I'm not certain how well that's gonna actually translate for playing it. So I don't know. I'll see. I'll most likely just wait a while. I'll definitely probably wait till at least hits $50 before I get it, maybe. But I don't know. I'm really hyped though for the game though, because I enjoyed Dragon Dogma 1. I've gone through a lot of stuff in the game, but I haven't necessarily completed it. But from what I played through the game, it's so good, and I was really looking forward to just going through all that again. I don't know. I just really went to. I have high hopes for the game. It definitely shows a lot of promise. Definitely shows more of what I enjoyed in the first one. And one thing that I actually do hope they bring back are certain references and certain designs, because I know that for the first game, they took a lot of references from the Berserk manga, especially with the character design. So they have some armor sets, even a couple default character design choices are based off of characters from the series. And there's even a giant sword that looks exactly like the sword from Berserk. So I'm hoping that some more references like that will appear that you can use to customize your characters. They most likely will. I'm kind of sad that they don't have online multiplayer. That's something I actually would have liked to have seen, because even though you do have the NPCs that aid you, I think that something like that really would have benefited from playing with other people. Sure, you can send your companions to help other players, but I just don't think it's the same as playing with a friend like you would, say, Monster Hunter.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just how I feel on everything.
Well, I played a bit of Dragon's Dogma on Switch. I liked most of what I played. The one thing that really bugged me, and I know that it's something that gets unlocked later in the game, but the fact that there was no fast travel, at least early on in the game, and I found that to be really frustrating, because it just got to a point where it was like, if I, I'd go all the way somewhere thinking that this is where I was supposed to go next, and then realize when I got there, I missed what I was supposed to get way back in this previous town. And so now I have to trek all the way back there. And it's just really slow and tedious and annoying. And that was the main thing that got me to stop playing the game. That and another thing that I know you can change later, but the way I had designed my character initially, I really ultimately didn't end up liking it, and it just was like playing as the character was bugging me, because I didn't like the way they looked at all. And I know that you can change it later on, but I wasn't to that point yet, so that was another part of it. And I did eventually end up buying it on PC, mostly because I wanted to test it out on Steam Deck, and it runs pretty well there, though it's not consistent on 60 frames, which is annoying, especially for that old of a game. But I didn't play much at all. I mean, I didn't really leave like the initial village. I basically got past the opening, where you fight the dragon or whatever, and then played a tiny bit past that, and that was it. Whereas I think I played like 20, maybe 15, 20 hours on the Switch version. So, but anyway, so this one, I'm like, if I can ever get back into the original Dragon's Dogma, then I'll probably be interested in this. But like right now, I don't really have an interest. I do think the specs are interesting. I don't like the fact that they're still only targeting 30 frames per second, because it's like, as of this point, even on PS4, Xbox One, PS5, Series X, you can't get above 30 frames per second because it's capped at that, which is dumb. I mean, PC you can get higher, but not on consoles, even though there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to. Granted, well, I don't know. But looking at these specs, I'd be curious about whether or not this would run on the Steam Deck, because some of the specs are like, maybe the processor's the main part that I'm not sure about. And of course, DirectX, at least in my experience so far, DirectX 12 sucks. Like, I find every time I've tried to run a game with DirectX 12 versus 11, it almost always crashes. And I end up just running it on 11 because then it doesn't crash. But I mean, my PC could probably run the recommended settings. I have a 2080 Ti. I have an i9-9900K, which is pretty comparable to the i7-10700. It's a little lower. It's like minus 3.6 gigahertz, and that one's 3.8. And I think they have the same number of cores. It's definitely better than the i5-10600, but a little weaker than the i7-10700 for the recommended. I have way more memory. I have 64 gigs of RAM, so I'm overkill. So I'm like, I could probably easily get 1080p 60, maybe better, depending on how CPU heavy it is and everything. But once again, it's just I have to get into the first one before I even consider the second one, and I know that it's supposed to be like a parallel universe or whatever, to where you don't have to play the first one in order to play the second one. But I don't know, the lack of fast travel just really rubbed me the wrong way. Like, that really ruined my experience, and it took what I enjoyed otherwise and just made it really hard for me to stick with it. So I don't know. Maybe eventually I'll give it a try again. I don't know. I'm having a hard time. Because the other thing is that it's like, I don't really want to start over. Because I don't like having to start a game like that over again. But it's been long enough since I played to where I don't even really remember the controls. And I'm sure I could probably figure them out. They weren't that hard. But it's like having to refigure it out, then having to figure out where I need to go so that I'm not spending as much time getting frustrated with the lack of fast travel until I can actually get it in whatever form it comes. And wanting to change my character's appearance because I hate my character's appearance. Anyway, I've ranted enough about this. All that being said, I think it's cool that it's coming out. The $70, it's not surprising, but at least there's Green Man Gaming for discounts for people who want it. I'm not in any way planning to buy this before it drops significantly in price and I actually get enough into the first game to where I feel like buying the second one is worth my time. And also finding out whether or not it runs on Steam Deck, because if it doesn't, then that's another mark against it for me. And I could even deal with the 30 frames if I had to for Steam Deck, if it ran, you know. But I don't know, because some of these specs, it's like... The CPU is really honestly the one thing I'm just not sure about. The GPU part, I mean... Because the Steam Deck is equal to about a 1060, so it's a little lower spec probably, but I don't know. It's so hard to tell for sure, because sometimes they say, oh, you know, the Steam Deck's not going to be able to run this, and then it runs, even if it's not running the best. So I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to a different topic. So speaking of games that technically run on Steam Deck but aren't great on Steam Deck, Starfield. So we have, well, at least I have been probably a bit more, I spend more time picking on PlayStation fanboys than I do Xbox fanboys. Mostly because they tend to be the ones who give more of a reason to be picked on. But I pick on PlayStation a bit more sometimes, mostly because I do like PlayStation, and it bugs me that they do so many things that are just like infuriating at times. But Starfield, currently on Steam, has about a 69% positive rating, and then a lot of negative reviews as well. And the developers of Starfield have decided to start responding to users on Steam who have given negative reviews. Now, this is one of those things that can either be a recipe for complete disaster, or can potentially do some positive PR. However, from what we've seen of how they've responded, it's kind of mixed. So, I'm not going to read the specific examples. There's some great videos out there that cover it, but a great one, of course, always recommend Oh No, It's Alex. He does a really good job covering some of these. But the short version is that the responses to these reviews are essentially either canned text, which I think is the most likely scenario, that these developers use, basically just copying and pasting a script, or they are AI generated. Potentially AI generated initially, the script that they need, and then they copy paste. Could be either one of those, but basically there's not any sort of like negativity towards the people who have negative things to say. Basically, it's just kind of like, okay, we're going to put our positive spin on the people's complaints by telling them all the things that the game does well and why the game's actually good, essentially, is what they're doing. I have lots of things to say about it because I play Starfield, or I have played it quite a bit, and I play off and on. So you as an outsider, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so I'll say that when I first heard about what had happened and watched Oh No, It's Alex's video, I was almost nervous because I was going to think that it was going to be the worst case scenario where the developers were actually flipping out over what people were saying.
Right.
So I'm glad that it wasn't that, but on the same hand, I really don't feel like a lot of the, because they were canned responses, I don't feel like that they really addressed what some people were saying, especially the more people were actually providing some positive feedback and criticism, just because it felt too much of a cookie cutter response. Like, I think it's fine that developers respond, but I think it's something that actually should provide something for that the actual person reviewing it understands, or something that they might not understand. Because I have seen, I can't remember what game, but there was some game that I had seen before where developers responded because someone said the controls were horrific, and the developer said, actually, if you go and try to do this under your settings, then that should work for you. So like something like that actually addresses the complaint. That's fine. But what what Bethesda is doing doesn't do that. It's really not providing any sort of feedback. It's not really providing any sort of answer, and it's really just seemed as a PR as far as why people should actually buy the game. So it doesn't really make sense to me why they're doing this. I think I wouldn't be surprised if it actually is AI generated, just because Microsoft, they have that big stake in Chat GPT, and they're trying to get some mileage out of that. So I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not discounting the fact that it is something that they just wrote up, copied and pasted, and just sent it out to a bunch of negative reviews. They definitely could do better. I definitely think that if they wanted to, I mean, they've got the resources. They could have someone dedicated to actually respond, listen, and take feedback. And something that actually, oh no, it's Alex, mentioned was the fact that for not Starfield, No Man's Sky, with Sean Murray and Hello Games, they took that feedback to heart. They actually went back, addressed those problems that people had, and they made it a better game. Now, I didn't play No Man's Sky when it first released. I played it way after the fixes had been made, and I think it's a good game. And I think that Bethesda should do the same thing with Starfield for people who have problems with it. Just take that feedback, go back to the board, and try to make improvements. Now, at the same time, I'm not saying that games should be like this. I'm not saying that games should be releasing in states that have problems at launch and they just say, well, we'll just fix it later. Like, I think that's a whole lot of the mentality that we have in this modern age where games are released digitally and they're connected to the internet, and so they'd say, hey, if it's messed up at launch, that's fine, we can always just fix it later. And that's if they fix it later. But at the same time, they should listen to what people are saying and try to fix those problems that are there. But that's just what I'm thinking as someone who hasn't played the game at all and just like sees all this stuff going on.
Right. So, okay, before I get into my overall thoughts on this, I do want to say one thing. Xbox fanboys. Something you need to understand, because I've seen this from a couple of them, even ones whose channels I've liked in general. But you're showing your Xbox fanboy colors when you start saying that this is PlayStation fanboys putting these reviews up. That's not how it works. On Steam, you can't put a review up until you've actually played the game. And all of these reviewers, all these people who have put negative reviews up, have played the game. Many of them have played it for a good 20-30 hours. Some of them even significantly more than that. And I mean, it is sometimes hard to understand how someone could play for 200 hours of a game and then put a negative review. I'm trying to understand that. That doesn't make sense to me. However, I do think that from what I've seen of the criticisms are completely valid. And while it's possible that there's one or two PlayStation fanboys who have a Steam account, bought the game on Steam, because they have to buy the game with Steam, and unless they got a key from someone gave them a key, they have to actually buy the game to play it. And it's possible that there are a handful of PlayStation fanboys who actually went that far because they have Xbox so much on their mind that they just have to do everything they can to discredit it, whatever. I don't think that's the majority. I think that probably it's like maybe 1 or 2% of the negative reviews would be that, and then the vast majority are just people who bought it on PC in general. And there are lots of valid criticisms. People will criticize the procedurally generated planets, so how there's a lot of stuff that feels very samey at times. that there's not enough variety, that the story doesn't feel like it has any real weight to it. I don't know, just all sorts of different things. Like, I don't have the specifics in front of me of what people have complained about, but looking at like the ones that Oh No, It's Alex was showing on his video, it was pretty much all really legitimate criticisms of the game, and I think that they were actually helpful things that can be improved about the game. I can think of some things that need to be improved about the game. Some of those have already been fixed by modders, but then later broken by updates, or the mods got broken with updates, particularly like one related to the inventory. Someone came up with a great mod for the inventory that makes it significantly better than what Bethesda did, and I guess when Bethesda made their most recent update that added DLSS and everything, it broke that, and I haven't had a chance to look up and see if there's an update to that mod to fix it again, because I miss it. But yeah, this, like, Starfield, I love Starfield. I really, really enjoy what I played, but the criticisms are largely really valid. I will say that I am thankful that it has fast travel. While it would be nice to also have some type of vehicle you can use for traversing planets, like a rover or something, something just to get around these large spaces so that it's not so slow, especially if you happen to be overburdened, because it's really easy to end up with carrying too much, and then it's like, unless you drop stuff on the ground, or on rare occasions, I mean, if your NPC companion happens to have ability to carry stuff, you can give them some of that, but like I find myself overburdened frequently, and that's even with trying to go down to as bare minimum as I can, and then I run out of space on my ship, and I don't have a place to put stuff in there.
Gosh.
And it's like, so I have to try and find, I have to get to, like, there's a crate or something that you can use in, like, the main city, like the main base of the group you're a part of, that I believe has basically unlimited storage. And anyway, like I said, there's lots of things that I think are worth criticizing about this game, lots of areas in which Bethesda can fix this game, and I'm sure as time goes on, they will make this game better. I mean, that's one thing they're typically good at. Even when a game launches and it's got some major issues, they fix a lot of those issues. I mean, like, from what I've heard, Fallout 76 is actually a good game now. I haven't played it, but I just haven't gotten into Fallout, even though I actually own all but 76, because I got 3 of them for free and 2 of them for cheap. But anyway, going back to Bethesda's responses to these negative reviews. So, I really was afraid that it was going to be the developers going off on the people who put the negative reviews, which I mean, we've seen that happen in other forms of media before, and even with game developers doing that to the people who have criticisms of their game, even when they're legitimate. And that is something they should never be doing. Never. Absolutely never. I think that it's good that they're willing to take the time to respond to people. I think that it's better that they're doing that than not saying anything like Hello Games did, or is it Hello Games that did the No Man's Sky? Yeah. So they were just completely silent on this. And ultimately it ended up being fine because they did fix their game, and everyone has said that it's great now. I just never really was that interested in it. But I think that, I don't know, I guess that can be okay as long as you're actually fixing things in the background. If you're going to be completely quiet, fix the game, that's fine. But I think it's also good to at least acknowledge that there's issues. There was that point in the past when Todd Howard, after people were complaining about how Starfield was not optimized for PC, basically just told people, you just need to get a better PC. And it's like, come on, son. No, that is not accurate. Your game is not well optimized. And it's proven by the fact that they've actually been making changes to fix that. But obviously that was kind of like more of a salty response on his side of things. And it was not a good response. I think the way that they're doing things right now with responding to these Steam reviews is good in that they're not being negative. They're not being salty. But the canned responses, I have mixed feelings about those. So, as I've mentioned previously, I work in IT, and one of the things that I have to do a lot is I have to send people the same responses over and over and over, because otherwise, if I manually type out every single response every single time when it's the same thing over and over, telling people, no, this is not phishing. Yes, this is phishing. We blocked the sender. This is spam. You don't have to report spam. You can just delete it. If you want, you can manually block the sender, but we're not going to block it because it's just spam. It's like, having these templates, it saves a lot of time. And obviously this is what they're doing in this situation, is they're using the templates. And then probably a lot of it is written by AI. Either that or potentially someone who's a decent writer wrote up the response, and then it was just that template that was given to everybody. Include this in your thing. Of course, there was that thing from that Oh No, It's Alex was reading.
Oh.
You can fly, you can shoot, you can fly, you can shoot, you can mine, you can loot. Which was like, yeah, that was.
I love that one.
Yeah. But I mean, so much of this stuff, it's like, okay, you're doing very much PR. Really, what they should just be doing is keep it very simple. Simply say, thank you for your feedback. We are doing everything we can to make this game even better as time goes on. Do something simple like that, you will win so many points with so many people, because that's one thing Bethesda does do, is they do typically improve broken aspects of their games. Now, they don't always fix everything. There are some issues with Skyrim that still exist to this day, apparently. I've definitely come across occasional bugs that have been really funny in Skyrim, like where you're talking to one of the dragons and he just suddenly starts like rising up into the air and just goes off into the stratosphere and he's still talking to you. And I mean, I've had weird bugs like that with the creation engine. I mean, the creation engine has its issues for sure. It has lots of issues, and it's definitely, it's like there are few. I don't think there are really any engines that does as much as it does, but at the same time, it's also just, I need to do something new. But all that being said, I don't know. I definitely understand why they're using canned responses. It makes sense, but I do think that if they're going to use canned responses, it would be so much better if they just kept it really simple, not trying to convince people this is a good game, but instead just say, thank you for your feedback. We are always seeking to improve our game and we'll take it into consideration. Keep it simple like that. You can win so many points with people, and it can potentially turn some of these reviews around. Now, I think that in general, it's just going to it's going to take time before the reviews are going to turn to mostly positive. I mean, it's like Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk had all sorts of issues early on, and now people love it. They fixed a lot of the problems, especially with the latest expansion that they did, and it's like they've made it a solid game. Not one that I'm going to play, but solid for people who really wanted to play it. And I've just heard great things about it overall. And it's not as buggy as it used to be. Bethesda needs to just take all that into consideration. I mean, I will say I do not think Starfield was nearly as disastrous as Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk had so many problems. Starfield has its issues, particularly in terms of optimization on PC, and it still has some bugs. It's got some issues with depth. I mean, it does a lot of things without doing them all, any of them super well. But I still think overall it's like a really solid game, and I really enjoy it. Not my favorite game by any stretch, especially not even this year. But it's still a good game. So anyway, any other thoughts on all that?
I think just one thing that sort of popped into my head that I think might sort of help something like this. And I think that overall Steam does a good job with reviews, especially with how they're verified and you actually have to buy a game. But I think that something that could actually improve it is that they have a third option for leaving a review, which is sort of a middle between whether you recommend it or don't recommend it. Just because I think that for some of these reviews, I think some people might actually, if there was that middle option, where it's they sort of recommend it but at the same time don't, I think that's something that people would actually use rather than just leave a flat out don't recommend, because that actually has happened with me with some games before, where I've played games where I wouldn't recommend them, but I would if they were on sale. And so I can't really say, and even though I'm typing out in my full review, if people just see the thumbs up or thumbs down, like that's sort of an endorsement or or I'm condemning the game. So I think if Steam had that third option there, I think that's something that really could help out with something like this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, I would be doing that for Destiny too, because there are so many things I love about the game, but it's also one where it's hard for me to recommend that people jump into it because it's so hard to get into, especially now, and there's just so much content that it's just anyway, I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, okay. All right, so moving on into the next topic here. So as we had talked about previously when we talked about the Game Awards nominees, there has been a lot of controversy when people realize that Dave the Diver is not actually an independent game, because it is done by Mint Rocket, who is owned by Nexon Studios, or is it Nexon Studios? Double check the name of that. Well, I don't know if it's Nexon Studios, but it's Nexon. Mint Rocket is a subsidiary of Nexon, and that's a very large South Korean publisher. So it's not independent. It's not a small team. It's not dealing with a small amount of funding, all of that. And basically, everyone who looks at this, knowing that it's funded by such a big company, would say this is not independent. Now, that's not saying that it's not a good game, that it doesn't deserve a lot of praise, because everything people have been saying is that this is a really great game. It looks great, it has great music, it does a lot of experimental gameplay elements, and just overall people really love this game. So all this controversy has come up, and very recently there was a Twitch Q&A session with Geoff Keighley, who of course is the guy who runs the Game Awards, and basically just people asking, why on earth did you put this in the independent category when it's not an independent game? So Geoff Keighley's response, and I quote, this is from an article from Games Radar, it's posted elsewhere also. Independent can mean different things to different people, and it's sort of a broad term, Keighley says. You can argue, does independent mean the budget of a game? Does independent mean where the source of financing was? Is it based on the team size? Is it the kind of independent spirit of the game, meaning a smaller game that is different? He adds, it is a really complicated thing to figure out and come up with strict rules around it, so we let people use their best judgment, and you can agree or disagree with the choices. So, I can I'll do my translation after you give your thoughts on this.
So, I guess while I understand that for some people, I guess I can agree to an extent that some people's opinion of what an independent game is, I still think that if you're having a Game Awards, you can't be vague for your categories. There should be cut and dry definitions of what an independent game is if you're going to have a game be nominated. I mean, you could, and granted, we sort of discussed this before, how I think it was for role-playing games, how there were a couple examples where we said, would this really count as a role-playing game? And we even discussed about the fact that should Resident Evil 4 Remake be nominated as Game of the Year because of the fact that it is a remake of a game that came out before. But I think for something like this specifically, for a genre, you really should have clear guidelines. This isn't something that you should just be vague. Sure, for some people, like say just the two of us discussing, hey, is this an independent game, and we discuss it, we argue about it, have debates, that's one thing. But for an organization, you definitely should state how that feels. Now, I saw that in that article there were a couple people who were saying stuff like that. I don't necessarily agree with what some people said. For example, saying that having many different systems, mini games, lots of cutscenes, incredible OST makes it not indie. I do think that there are some things that people, I think that still, even years later, there's still a bit of stigma attached to the word indie, because people think of something, if it's indie, it's something that's either going to be a pixel art game, like say Shovel Knight, or it's something that's going to be shovelware. So that there's something like that, but I think that indie has definitely advanced. I mean, we're looking at, say, and I feel like maybe even some people might even argue against this, but say certain games that are on Kickstarter, they look very good. They look like something that you actually could possibly see being something on the scale of, say, a AA studio. And some people might say, well, because it's being funded by a lot of people and that allows the budget to, say, go up, that it might not qualify. I still would say that it's an indie game because of the fact that it is a game that's being made by just a small group of people. Like, I think one good example would be Bloodstained. Bloodstained, which was made by Koji Igarashi, who worked on the Castlevania games from Symphony of the Night onward, and actually made the Igavania term. That's some people recommend that, say that's an indie game. It's definitely got a high degree of work put into it. Definitely has people who are it's people who have like high names who have done stuff like, of course you got Iga, but then you also have David Hayter, the voice of Solid Snake. He did voice acting for the game. So I guess when you have something, I do agree that something could be vague in a sense, because you say, well, the game came out on Kickstarter, but it was a big budget game because it had a lot of people who are high profile. Oh man, I'm saying a lot of stuff, but not really going anywhere. But I guess the point I'm trying to get to is people will have arguments about what indie games are, but for the Game Awards, especially for this, they should have made this clear about what an indie game is before having these nominations. And then I guess I really just don't care for his response. I will say that though, but those are my thoughts on this.
So before I give my translation of what he said, I do want to point out there's one user that they quote user at Dominic Terrason, who says that a hard line should be that indie means self-owned. Neither studio nor game should be owned or held by a corporate interest. And I think that is a really good way to put it. Because, that's, indie, independent, it's truly independent. That's, this is, Mint Rocket is very clearly not independent. They are owned by a very large publisher, billion-dollar corporation. So, not independent. But to translate what Geoff Keighley said about this, and I don't speak in tongues, and I'm not normally someone who would interpret tongues, but I'm going to do my best to interpret in to the same extent that normal people can interpret tongues, and that is to say that Geoff Keighley was saying that the people who made the nominations all thought that this was an indie game because it looks like an indie game because it's pixel art. And I'm not going to throw them under the bus. So instead, I'm going to come up with all this PR speak to basically justify the inclusion of this. So that's kind of the short version. I really believe that that's all that there is to this, because I know that he doesn't really have that much say in these nominations. It's basically that they get a panel together of journalists, games journalists and otherwise, and they put together their list. And I'm sure that probably more than anything, because of the typical quality of both games journalists and the journalists who write about video games separately for different publications that are not video game focused, they probably just all thought it was an independent game because it's a pixel art game. And so basically these people didn't bother to look into it, and they just assume it's independent, and that's why it got the nomination. And he's trying to cover his bases, and he's a good enough guy to not throw anyone under the bus, and I think that's respectable. But yeah, I really think that it just comes down to he basically had to come up with an excuse, or the PR firm had to come up with an excuse to justify, adding this. To keep that in there, even though it's really not an indie game at all. So, that's really, that's pretty much my thoughts on the matter. I'm sure this game is great. The diving portions to me look like something I would really enjoy. It's the kitchen portions that I don't think I would enjoy, because I don't like those stressful kind of things. That's the reason why I won't play something like Overcooked. That's the reason why, even though I love to cook, I do not want to work in a restaurant. I do not want to have my own restaurant because it's super stressful. I like to enjoy my cooking. But yeah, I wish the game didn't have that element, because I think the diving parts, like, it looks fantastic. All the exploration and everything, it just looks like, you can make a Metroidvania out of this. And I don't know. I might look into it eventually, like, kind of get a better idea of how the other parts of the gameplay flow, but I just feel like those parts would be too stressful for me to actually be able to enjoy it, and that would take away from my ability to enjoy the game overall. So, any other thoughts?
No, sir.
All right, so let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and talk about Embracer.
Sure thing. All right, so another studio is possibly reaching, or possibly facing, a closure, and that is Free Radical Design. They originally made the Time Splitters games, and they shut down before being, before restarting over again some time ago. They also worked on Haze for the PS3, which wasn't really met with critical acclaim, and they did one other game, but they're facing closure before Christmas, or at least they're facing the threat. I don't think that it has been said that it actually will happen, but I definitely think it's possible. And it's part of Embracer because they're restructuring their entire system, because when they've done this before, they did that with several other development companies. And shortly after, I think it was Crystal Dynamics, I think something happened with Crystal Dynamics, and they're trying to decide if they want to actually keep Crystal Dynamics or sell them, which after they bought them from Square Enix. But Free Radical is another company that is facing the chopping block. And what's strange here is that there were rumors that that they were going to actually make another, if not another Time Splitters game, a remake or remaster of their older games, because they had, I believe, 3. They had Time Splitters 1, Time Splitters 2, and Time Splitters Future Perfect. And yeah, so that's pretty much the big news there. I guess I'll just quickly mention something here. I'm disappointed in this because I played a bit of Time Splitters, I think 2, back when I think it was on PS2 at a friend's house, and I thought the game was pretty fun. I liked it, and I remember when I got my Nintendo GameCube, I saw one of the games that were advertised on the box was Time Splitters Future Perfect, and I thought, that seemed kind of interesting. I would like to get that. And years later, when I got on PC, I thought, okay, maybe I'll get the PC version. And I found out there never was a PC port of Time Splitters, and that was very disappointing. So the fact that we will never, possibly never get a PC version of any Time Splitters game or any sort of remake or remaster is really disappointing. And I think this is one thing that people say a lot about Microsoft, about how Microsoft buys so many companies and they either don't do anything with them or they just put out bad games. Well, Embracer Group has bought more companies than Microsoft, and they've been selling them now left and right recently, or shutting them down because they need the money. And that just goes to show you that people really have been focusing so much on Microsoft that they don't look at someone else because they aren't a console maker, which is really ridiculous when you think about it. The fact that they want to, especially with shoot, who was it? Was it I forget. Especially with the European group that was spending months trying to fight Microsoft. They never did a thing with Embracer Group. And I think that more people should actually point fingers at Embracer Group and call out the fact that they've bought out all these companies. I think also another example was THQ, which I know they bought THQ, and I think that was before it became THQ Nordic. And there were some other game companies that they bought, but the fact that this is probably going to happen more as they're still scramble, especially since they haven't said how many other companies are going to go under or how many they're going to fold or sell. We're possibly going to see this happen more often until Embracer says, okay, we're fine, we can let things go back to normal. So that's primarily what I have to say there. I'm still just disappointed that we'll never get this game, because I can always emulate it, but I just really just like a full native port. That's all I want.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, I never played any of the Time Splitters games. I got my PS2 really late, and I can't. Time Splitters was on more than just PlayStation, though, right?
It was on PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube.
That's what I thought.
I don't know if GameCube had all 3 games or not, but it had at least Future Perfect.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, like, I've always heard of them, but I've never played any of them. And this whole thing with Embracer, it's like this massive company with, I mean, they literally have the market. They're the market leader in terms of, or they own more developers than any other publisher in all of gaming right now. significantly larger than Microsoft. And the problem is that Microsoft actually has the money to fund these things, whereas Embracer is basically just borrowing money to grab these things, and then a large portion of them haven't really put anything out. Like they've done some remasters of some like GameCube, PS2, Xbox games, and I think for the most part they've been really well received. Like all those remasters have been great, even a couple remakes, that sort of thing. And it's like, okay, that's great that they were doing that, buying these developers from that standpoint. But the problem is that they're spending more money than they have to spend, and so then they're just digging themselves a deeper hole, which is why they're having to either sell off the studios or just shut them down. And it's just disappointing seeing this happen. Even though I have no familiarity with Time Splitters in terms of actually playing it or anything else, I've heard lots of people say that they really like those games, and they've been, looking forward to eventually seeing them come out. And now looks like that's not going to happen at all, unless, they figure something else out. But I'm like, I don't know. It's just, no matter how much people try to villainize Microsoft in this, in their purchases, Embracer is so much worse. And that's not to say necessarily that Microsoft isn't going to have issues in the future. We'll have to wait and see. But I think that the big difference, obviously, is that Microsoft isn't having to borrow money to buy these developers. They just have the money, and they need to spend it. So they decide to spend the $69 billion on Activision Blizzard. They bought Bethesda, and they bought smaller studios like Ninja Theory, and I can't remember which other ones, but yeah. Anyway, it's unfortunate that this is happening, and I don't know. I don't really know what else to say on the matter. Any other thoughts?
No, sir.
All right, well, I think we have enough time to go ahead and cover just one last topic here. This is a more of a positive thing. So, I didn't catch the actual date. Let me see here. I have the article brought up here. So, there was essentially a leak, a playable leak, really, briefly playable version of Beyond Good and Evil, which is getting a 20th anniversary remaster coming. I mean, we don't have confirmation of exactly where all it's coming to, but it was essentially leaked on Xbox, and some people were able to access and play it already a little bit. Basically, the gist of it is that it's supposed to have fixed controls, some autosaves added, that sort of thing. 4K 60 frames per second on at least Xbox, presumably also PS5 and PC. Of course, PC would probably easily be able to do like 240 frames per second or more if you have a higher refresh rate. But yeah, this is something that's going to be revealed at the Game Awards, as far as we can tell. And Beyond Good and Evil came out in 2003. So this will be the 20th anniversary. Beyond Good and Evil 2 was originally teased in 2008 and has been in development hell ever since then. We got some previews of supposed gameplay that was supposedly on PS4 and Xbox One, which is like, no, this isn't. This is not PS4 and Xbox One. If it is, this is just cutscenes. That's all it is. And that was in, I think, it was 2017 that it was revealed again for that. And it's like, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I still don't believe that game actually exists. Now, talking about Beyond Good and Evil, I played this for the first time, and I believe it was 2010 on PC, and the controls were kind of rough because it did not feel great as a mouse and keyboard game, at least not for me, but I was still really new to playing games mouse and keyboard. And I was able to get like a PS2 controller working with it through like a USB adapter, but it still required a lot of finagling to get it working, and even then still didn't work the best. It was all right, but yeah, I think this could be pretty cool. I'm hoping, even though it wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't happen, but I'm hoping that maybe like Ubisoft or GOG, because I bought it through GOG, will just give this remaster as a free upgrade for PC users, because then that would give me a reason to grab it. Otherwise, probably not until it's like really cheap or free. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
I think this is pretty nice. Now, I haven't played the game originally. I also have it on GOG, but I never got around to playing it. So I'm not certain how actually it does run with the controller and whatnot. Although I have heard a lot of good things about the game, I do know that people have definitely said that this has been a great game and that it was sort of, I guess, underrated when it released. I think that I mean, I know that when that some gameplay footage was taken down by Ubisoft and said that what was shown wasn't indicative of the actual full game. I mean that they could be right. I also wonder if maybe maybe not a demo, but maybe the game actually is probably ready. It might be shadow dropped at E3 or something like that. Just like, hey, game's ready to be bought right now. So I think it's pretty much ready, or at least near ready. If actual game files are actually being put up on the Xbox Store. I am looking forward to it, and I also think it would be nice if we got that sort of update for the games for people who own it, because that would be nice. Definitely would also probably give me a reason to say, you know what, maybe I will jump into the game. Maybe I'll even try it on Steam Deck and see how it runs and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, it should run great there.
So yeah, I'm definitely hyped about that. One thing I do feel like might happen though is the fact that Ubisoft might, at least for PC, make it only available on the Ubisoft store. That's something I feel might happen, and at best, it'll be released on, say, Steam a year or so from now.
Well, not necessarily, because I think that most of their new games have been Steam day and date lately. I could be wrong on that. Actually, I'll just double check that, but I think that's the case. Let me check and see here. So we got Mirage, Assassin's Creed Mirage. I could be wrong. Yeah, you might be right, actually. Yeah, it looks like it's probably not. Okay, so I'm wrong on that. So yeah, probably will be something along those lines where it's not on Steam right away. I don't mind Ubisoft Store. I have enough games through there to where it's like it's not that bad. I like it. Of course, I would prefer everything was through Steam, and if there was a way to transfer everything over to Steam so that I didn't have to run the Ubisoft launcher anymore, I definitely would. But you know, I have enough games in there to where it's like, I can deal with it. But yeah. But anyway, yeah, most likely it will be revealed and shadow dropped at the Game Awards. I'd say that's a very likely scenario, and we'll just have to wait. Oh, okay. So actually, you know what? I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know. Let me read what it says here. Ubisoft has tweeted on with their official Beyond Good and Evil account on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. That they confirmed that the remaster's existence, clarified that the playable version of the game that leaked was a mistake and not indicative of the final game, and that we will learn more closer to the game's launch in early 2024. So it won't be a shadow drop. but they still could show it at the Game Awards. And my guess is they'll probably just do like a trailer saying that it's coming early 2024, and then early 2024 they'll actually show. Of course, now that I look at this again, we'll learn more closer to the game's launch in early 2024. Well, December is close to early 2024, so it could very well be that they just give the information at the Game Awards. And anyway, doesn't really matter. And we'll see if Beyond Good and Evil 2 will ever actually come out. But
I just thought about this would be the 15th. You said 2008. This would be the 15th anniversary of the game's announcement.
Yep. Oh. I mean, granted, then it was only just like a little short teaser, and then they showed all that gameplay that was. It was not believable. It was like less believable than the original demo of Watch Dogs that they showed before they released the real version of the game. But yeah,
that's Ubisoft.
Anyway, all right. Any other thoughts before we close out for the night?
No, sir.
All right. So recommendations and dissuasions.
All right. So I actually had to make a note of this because I said I'm going to forget this. Alright, so my recommendation... Oh, wait. Oops, never mind. That actually was no one. So I'm actually going to have to pull this one out of a hat now because that actually was one that I had recommended before. So my recommendation is to... Okay, here's my recommendation. This is something that I sort of recommended before, but I will recommend it here just the same. It's getting colder outside, and you might feel that you do not need to stay hydrated, but that is still further from the truth. You will still need to be hydrated, so make sure you drink some water, make sure you do whatever you need to stay hydrated, because you will still be dehydrated, and it will not be a good feeling for your body. So stay hydrated.
Alright, that's always a good one. I definitely have not been doing very well with that lately. Not drinking nearly as much water as I usually do, so it's always a good reminder. My recommendation is actually going to be the Metal Gear Solid series. I will say, if you are not as interested in getting to the series, and I had to recommend just one game, I would recommend Metal Gear Solid 5. Not as the best Metal Gear Solid game, but as the best overall, just like modern feeling game, because it definitely feels very modern. It's a great action stealth open world game, but it's not like there's not too much in the world. Like, it's not a huge open world, but there's stuff to do. The stealth mechanics and just the mechanics in general are really, really solid. I can't speak highly enough of the addition that they added with Peace Walker, but brought forward in 5, and that is when you have enemy combatants that you knock out or put to sleep, you can use the Fulton extraction mover, which is basically you attach a balloon to them. It's like a special balloon that inflates quickly and then launches them up to a helicopter where they get picked up, so that they can be added to your base as part of like your staff. Fantastic feeling being able to just do that every time. That once they added that, it's like, this is brilliant. I love this so much. I think that was the one thing that turned me from being kind of like down on Peace Walker to actually really loving it. Even though it's one of my least favorite ones, but it still was a great game overall. So yeah, if you're interested in getting into Metal Gear Solid, it's not too late. I got into it really late. The games are mostly short. They're not the controls haven't aged super well, but at the same time, I mean, it's not like tank controls, which to me, tank controls are the worst. I think that is probably the worst relic of the PS1 era. Every time I've tried to play a game with tank controls now, it's excruciating. But the controls in the controls get progressively better as you go. Like there's a little bit of jank that still remains, but they get progressively better. Metal Gear Solid 3, you actually have third person, like normal third person controls as an option. Some of the earlier versions you can still do the top down, like the not quite top down, isometric view, and that, you know, I didn't play it that way. I've only ever played it just regular third person controls. And while I would say 3 is the best of them all as an overall game, in terms of how the games control, 5 is hands down the best. And just the overall gameplay, I think, is the best. It's just not the best in terms of story and bosses and all of that. Granted, I'm still really early in the game, and but I have like 30, 40 hours in the game so far, and I love it. So that's my recommendation.
Nice.
Your dissuasion.
So for my dissuasion, do not buy or do not watch things that you know you will hate. That's something that I sort of see from a lot of larger YouTubers that I watch, and they talk about certain things from companies that they don't like, and while I agree to an extent, they sort of propagate this by either, say, going to see a movie or by buying a game, which they already talk about and saying that they don't like it, but then they go and spend the money on it and therefore support what they say they don't like. So if that's you, don't do that. Why should you spend your hard-earned money on something you don't like or know you won't like? It's like buying some meal at a restaurant and you know you don't like that particular food, but then you go and spend the money and then you complain about it being bad. Well, you bought it.
Yeah.
So save your money on something that you would like. I mean, sure. I guess it's nice if you have that kind of disposable income where you can do something like that. But just don't do it. Save your money for something that you actually will like. And sure, you might be wrong, and it might surprise you that you would like that. But I think that 9 times out of 10, you definitely won't like it. So don't do that.
That's fair. One thing I will say about like those bigger creators, I mean, they probably make way more money off of talking about it than they spent on watching it or what have you. So, it's content. I mean, like I definitely can respect the hustle. It's a, that's how they make their money. That's how they pay the bills. So, hey, if they're gonna get a lot of people watching to hear their opinions, then by all means, it makes sense to do it. I personally, I don't know how much I would do that unless it was just like, if I was a channel that was based more off of trashing stuff than anything else, then yeah, that would be a good reason to check out the things I hate. Since it's not, then I don't have to. So I wouldn't. Granted, I'm also not making any money on YouTube or anything like that, so there's a difference there. My dissuasion, if you have not already played The Last of Us Part 2 and you don't know what you're going to think of it, but you loved The Last of Us Part 1, do not play Part 2. Do yourself a favor. Especially if you are someone who really appreciated the way that 1 ended. Because it was definitely the kind of ending where, like, it wasn't a happy ending. Not at all, but it was a memorable ending, and the way it ended, I think, was one of the things that actually made that game as good as it was. Part 2 should not exist. Don't buy Part 2. If you're going to buy Part 2 and you haven't already played it before, make sure you buy a cheap, discounted PS4 copy. Because you want to spend as little money as possible, or just wait until it's like super duper cheap on Steam. You probably could find copies though that would, you could probably find a used copy for $10 and it'll still work great. And you'll just be much happier with yourself. Now, I know some people are still going to love it, but the vast majority, I think normal people are going to hate it for the most part. It's funny. So the number one podcast I listen to, all these guys loved I should say 3 out of 4 of them loved The Last of Us Part 2. One of them has said very distinctly that as much as he loved the first game, and he was a huge fan of it, was happily day one purchase on Last of Us Part 2. He said Last of Us Part 2, he hated it. He does not believe it should exist, and if they do a Part 3, he is not going to buy it because of how much he hated Part 2. But all of these guys really surprised me when it came to the remaster news, and they all said they are not interested, and they think that it's essentially milking people for it. So, more power to you guys. I appreciate the fact that you were able to get past some of your enjoyment of that and see how ridiculous this is that this remaster exists. And so I'm gonna say once again, do not buy The Last of Us Part 2, especially not the remaster. If you've already bought the game, do not buy the remaster. Do not pay that $10 upgrade fee. Just leave it. If you want to play it again, play it again. Play the version that you already have. Don't give them the money for this lazy remaster that just basically throws in some beta content and that's it. It's not worth your money. So anyway, I'm done. All right. So where can people find you?
They can find me on my YouTube channel. I am Xeracon. That is IAMXERACON. So youtube.com/@IamXeracon. And I should have another video coming out. Maybe the end of this week, early next week. We'll see.
And what's the last one you put up?
Last one I put up, I think that was my Steam Deck OLED unboxing. I think that might be it.
Good. So I'm actually caught up because it seems like, well, not just it seems like, I never get notified about any of your videos, and then I come back looking it up and it's like, oh, there's 3 videos I haven't seen. It's like, I watch all your videos, I like your videos, and I comment on your videos, and yet they never show up in my YouTube feed at all. I have to search for you manually. But it is what it is. So, all right, cool. You can find me in youtube.com/@thefrozengamer87. I don't have any content specific planned at the moment. Well, I take that back. Something that I am hoping to do, but I'm not going to promise that it's going to happen anytime soon, is I want to do some direct comparisons between the Switch OLED and the Steam Deck OLED for various games, specifically third-party games. So, I'll probably be doing things like Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, The Outer Worlds, potentially Fez. I'm not sure if that one's really a good comparison, because that's not going to be drastically different, I think. Well, except the fact that one will run at 90 frames per second and the other is only 60. Probably Hades, Guacamelee 1 and 2. Let's see, I'm looking at my shelf here, because there's... Final Fantasy 12, the Zodiac Age is one I wanted to do. Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim is definitely one to do a comparison with. Maybe Lego City Undercover. I haven't really decided if I actually want to download that one on my Steam Deck. I'm sure there's some others, but anyway. So I'm hoping to do some comparisons. It's just a matter of finding the time to record that. That's really what it comes down to, more than anything else. I won't have to do a whole lot of editing. And then it's also finding a time when I can do it where the kids aren't going to be noisy in the background, so you can actually hear the game audio without just kids yelling and chasing the cats and everything else that they're doing, or making the dog mad. Anyway, so yes, that's the only thing that I might be putting up in this not too distant future. Hopefully before the end of this year, I'll start getting some of those up. I'll probably just record a bunch of them back to back and then try to get them posted so we have some content on the channel. But yeah. So, until next time, I am Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zeracon. And in the words of Phil Spencer, to quote him directly, gaming. Orange Box Podcast.